maybe before I start talking to Tim, maybe you can let me know what you're having for lunch today. I see that there's a bit of a Mexican trend happening today, so I'm breaking it with having a pizza later on.
What kind of pizza?
Actually a veggie pizza. And then I've got some tin tuna, so I just put that on top just to get extra protein, because there's not a lot of protein in the vegetarian pizza.
So I do. Someone's just said Erica's showing off about her lunch. That is a very fancy lunch, actually.
It is, and
I'm quite jealous.
Yeah, I normally make a nice lunch, but I just was so busy the last couple of days I didn't get a chance, because I like cooking, and usually I get told off for showing off my lunch. So I'm glad I haven't had to do that for a while. Well, I'm not glad. I wish I would, but I just haven't had time.
Oh, cheese on toast, someone's commenting.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had cheese on toast for years.
Hi, Pippa. Hi, Steve. Hi, Louise. Hi, Debbie. I wonder what Debbie's having. Mind you, it's 8 a.m. in Indiana, so I'm guessing apples. So anyway, Tim, let's how about we begin? So maybe you can just, for people who don't know you already, you can tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start talking about our topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to steer me back if I go off on too much of a tangent. But lovely to meet everyone. I'm Tim, I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called, well, I'm not really showing it off, Sourcewell. There we go, wearing my school uniform. CEO of a company called Sourcewell, which is in the recruiting/HR tech space. In terms of my background, though, I started my career at PwC, so a tiny, tiny cog in a humongous wheel. And then I went into the startup life, but working at someone else's startup, not one that I founded, about the 10th employee. And obviously went from being a small cog in a massive wheel to still a small cog, but in a very small wheel, and realized that I really enjoyed the process of trying to grow and build small companies and actually seeing the results of the work that I did. But that's what gave me the startup bug. And obviously I had the urge to start my own thing. And along with my co-founder, Harry Jackson, which is one of my best friends I met at uni about, I was going to say 5 years ago, but now it's over a decade. God, wow, time flies, especially with COVID. Met him over a decade ago, and we were sitting there every night trying to think, what's the next Uber we could work on? What's the next grand idea, that no one's ever thought of before? But in the meantime, both Harry and I had been heavily involved in recruiting. For our tech startups, Harry was CTO of his. And he basically started building himself a tool which helped him automate some of the administrative parts, I'm sure we'll get onto this later, of the kind of sourcing process to help speed him up, because he didn't have an in-house recruiter at that point in time. So he built this tool, but still every night we were ignoring that. I was using the tool as well. I'd mentioned it to a couple of our friends, they were using it, but still we were trying to think of this grand idea that no one had ever thought of before, not realizing we had a pretty good idea right in front of us. Once a couple of my friends who worked in recruitment in agency said, this is pretty good, I then went the opposite way and thought, screw it, quit my job without really knowing what I was doing. Started in January 2020, so a year and a bit ago now, actually a recruitment agency, but using the technology. So we were very, very greedy. We were like, we'll just use this tech. We won't give it to anyone else, and it will help us recruit. Bearing in mind that I don't actually have any experience of being an agency recruiter up until then. And also bearing in mind, it's probably, apart from 2008, one of the worst possible times in living memory to try and start a business, but also a recruitment-based business. So had a lot of fun for the first half of the year, but what it did allow me to do was walk a mile in the shoes of our clients. So our clients are often either agency recruiters or in-house recruiters. And walking a mile in their shoes, actually doing some recruitment for myself, using the product, had some kind of partner agencies. And it was only in about July of this year that we pivoted to actually purely just doing tech, which I've realized I'm a bit of a tech nerd. I'm much better at selling tech than I am at recruiting myself, but I've got a bit of an experience in it too.
Okay, well, that's good. At least it gives you a good background to talk about what we're really going to talk about today, which is really what we should automate and maybe what we shouldn't automate. So maybe you can start talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'd be really keen to hear everyone's input from the audience as well, because I know there'll be a lot of people here that have got a lot more experience in recruiting than I do. I have a lot of experience in automation though, and tech, and obviously a little bit of experience in the recruiting side. And obviously all of our clients are using us to automate what I would call their sourcing process. And I find it really interesting because I kind of think that the automation's gone full circle in the fact that, and you still see it these days, people who automate the entire process, whether it be sales or recruiting. I'm sure, Shafiq, you find this as well. I get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 connection requests a day that say, hi, Timothy, just reaching out about insert generic comment here. And you can tell humans are really good at picking up on subtle things like that. I mean, we can be quite stupid sometimes, but we're very good at, I can pick up, when something, you can tell if something's come from a MailChimp or a newsletter, or if someone's using a LinkedIn automation tool, and it instantly sets something off in your head where, this person hasn't looked at your profile. How do they truly know that they can provide value to you? It's a two-way street. When you're trying to sell someone something, when you're trying to offer them a job, if you've just gone and said, right, I'm just going to go and automatically connect with 10,000 software engineers that are skilled in X, Y, and Z, it's obvious. And I think that really gets people's back up. So, on the first step, that's the kind of thing that I wouldn't automate. But there are very many parts of the process that I still think are important to automate, in terms of enriching people's contact details, bringing together those templates that you might base your outreach on, but not automating the entire messaging, the hyper-personalization, showing that you've read that person's message, logging that activity, chasing up with people, pushing that data into your various systems, logging what works, what doesn't work. That's what's your view, I suppose, actually, before I go on?
I would agree with you. I remember, looking at your profile and it says, call me Tim. So when somebody says Timothy, that it's either taken on something, it's really not how you want to be called. So if they've looked at your profile, they know it's Tim you want to be called. And that's a good way for you to know. For me, it's the same, when I see it all in capitals, because that's the way I've made it on LinkedIn, put my name in capitals. And then I know if it's all in capitals, it's just a mailer. So, and I find, okay, I tend to just delete them right away, because I know it's not personalized. So it's part of a marketing campaign or something. And I just, unless I see something in there that's interesting. So I totally agree with you that especially maybe that first outreach, it better be personalized to that person.
Absolutely. I think you're right about the first outreach as well. Obviously, chasers, things like that can definitely, definitely be automated, I think. Obviously, depending on what the messaging is and when you're sending it, etc. But I think the main thing for me is the importance with automation is it's important to automate a task, not a job. And that's the thing that sometimes people get wrong, trying to automate the entire process, things you shouldn't, picking the right person, you definitely shouldn't be doing that. That's what, for example, the thing on my LinkedIn profile is capable of picking up. I'm called Timothy on there. Everybody calls me Tim, apart from my mum, who does call me Timothy. It's really, it's really useful for me just to understand, has this person looked at me or not? So that's one thing I wouldn't automate. Hyper-personalizing that messaging, showing that you've actually looked at that person's profile. Again, not something you can automate, though this could be a mixed task. Again, not to go into too much detail on my company, but that's what it helps you do. It will bring your templates out. You may be looking for a particular role, a particular kind of person. You can load up your templates. We can, pre-fill some of the relevant information. But the time that you save on the administrative tasks of the role are the time that you should then invest in the human parts, the bit that a robot cannot do. And to be frank, AI will not be able to do for a very, very long time until we've got artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I guess what I used to do in the past is maybe have email templates in place anyway, and then I would just change the name. So I am still personalizing it, but I know most of the content will be the same. So if I can automate that part, the admin part of it, and then I can just focus on not then making mistakes on actually personalizing, especially that outreach message to the candidate. And so I totally agree with that. And then
I think on an individual basis as well, obviously if you're a manager of a team, people will find ways to automate certain parts of their job anyway. And I think, top talent, like talent acquisition professionals who are top at their game, it's it improves their morale as well. Really good people don't want to do tasks that a robot can do. The problem is that then people give automation a bad name and automate the entire thing.
Yeah. And I think that's probably when it goes too far. So talking about that, what would you say, what would you not automate if we start with that to begin with?
Yeah, so I would not automate. So again, Sourcewell is not a LinkedIn automation tool. I personally, I'm sure there'll be people on the call, I'd love to hear from them that do use LinkedIn automation. And maybe you can use certain parts of automation on LinkedIn, to your advantage. I think obviously one of the risks with automating LinkedIn is that there's a risk that you'll get your account restricted as well. And in recruiting, recruiting, sales, whoever you are these days, especially with COVID, LinkedIn is a fantastic database and social network of people. So you want to be kind of careful about automating steps on LinkedIn. Would be my first view. And obviously a lot of the things that you can automate using LinkedIn automation tools are the things that I think you shouldn't be. So you don't want to be putting in a LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Recruiter search results and saying, go off and connect with these 300 people with high first name, etc. Because that's when I think you'll come a cropper, not just from a risking your LinkedIn account perspective, but also from these people will see this message and be like, this is automated.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said before, those are the kind of things that turn me off when it is that impersonal. In fact, I'd probably, if you even send a message without saying why, I might connect with you. But when it's automated, then I just think it's almost like a spam campaign. And then those are the people I probably want to avoid connecting to.
And the problem is with it is you may have something that's really of value that you're offering that person, but because that person's also being reached out to by 50 other people who've got the same kind of template, the same kind of message, the same kind of indicators of automation, that's what's going to turn someone off. So you don't even get your chance to get kind of your foot in the door.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, when you probably get lots of stats on what happens when people are using automation tools. So, do you have any data on, like, let's say, what's the response rate when you personalize, obviously, your reach out message and then the follow-up messages? What is the response rate of the first and second messages, and then maybe, I don't know, third or fourth?
Yeah, so it's really interesting in terms of, I can talk in a sad amount of detail on the metrics. Across our entire, so we have in our platform, for people who don't know what Sourcewell is, we can basically plug into your email. We work alongside things like LinkedIn, GitHub, Facebook, Stack Overflow to help you get contact details for people, add them to automated sequences, but automating things like the follow-up, pushing that data into your CRM. So we're collecting a lot of data from a lot of recruiters, both in-house and on the agency side, and seeing what's working and what's not. In terms of hyper-personalization, it makes a massive impact. We often have to control for the same team. Because obviously people get vastly different response rates, partly based on their email domain, like how healthy, are they going through to people? Are they end up being spam? Partly is the kind of people they're reaching out to, and partly the messaging. So it's quite hard to control for these things. But we see a definite uptake within the same team on the individuals who hyper-personalize or have a part, in the message where they're going to add some content, not just their boilerplate template, and those that don't. And that can range anywhere for about 20 to 40% uptake in response, not necessarily a 20 to 40% response rate overall, but when you're comparing template to hyper-personalization.
Okay.
Other thing in terms of the data side, while we're on the topic, if you're sending emails, really interesting, but subject line, on the candidate side, the subject line that works best, genuinely, we seem to see is just company. So the name of their company. It's absolutely insane, but that has the highest open rate across all of our teams. And I think part of the reason is that this is probably a sad amount of detail for people on the call. So please tell me if you want me to stop. But a lot of people are opening their emails on their phones these days, especially if it's their personal emails. If you're reaching out to candidates rather than clients, and a lot of the apps cut off, truncate subject lines after about 25, 30 characters. So we see whatever you're writing, a shorter subject line has a 20% on average better open rate. But on top of that, hyper-personalization in the subject line, referencing their company, referencing their name, stuff like that does pique their interest. Albeit, open is only half the battle. It's less than half the battle. You could have the best content in the world in your message. You could have hyper-personalized it to the ends of the earth. You could have written it manually, whatever you want. If people aren't even opening your messages, you're falling at the first hurdle.
Exactly. So just having their company name, so even like a recruiter reaching out to a candidate, say at Cisco, will say Cisco.
Yeah. Wow. Genuinely, it's crazy. I've always thought that kind of first name dash maybe the name of the company you're hiring for. If you're open about that stuff. Obviously, if you're an in-house recruiter, you can reference it directly. It's obvious. If you're an agency recruiter, there may be reasons why you don't want to reveal the name of the client straight away. I used to get first name company, something like that. But it's really interesting. Genuinely, it does seem to pique their interest. I would obviously caveat it with, if you're going to reference their company in the subject line, you don't want to make the subject line too clickbaity. If you put, I mean, I'm sure you could put something else like you've won the lottery. Actually, that would probably end up in people's spam. But you could put something very misleading that makes people open the email. You'll get a massive drop in response rate if your subject line is not related, obviously, to what you're offering. Yeah. But actually, things that make people a bit inquisitive and are shorter and more snappy, and obviously show some kind of personalization, name, company, gets a way better open rate. A starkly different open rate, actually. I was really surprised.
Tell you what, I will try that, and I will let you know how it works for me.
Absolutely.
And then when it comes to follow-up emails, say from your initial email, what data do you have maybe on a follow-up email and the response rate or open rate, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. So one really interesting bit of data we're seeing. So we have about probably 1 million messages going through or via our platform every month. So we have quite a big data set. And I think what we're looking at right now, it is varying around 70%, it's probably like 65% right now, of responses are coming from a chase, from a follow-up. So if you're not following up, you are missing out. But that is one of those incredibly manual, painful, morale-sapping parts of a recruiter's job, right? Yeah. Chasing up with people by email. And that's the kind of thing, I mean, in my view, that you can automate. If you have a clever enough system, that's plugged into your emails, it can see who's replied, who hasn't replied, and send chasers. Obviously, we're a predefined template or messaging that you've previously written. But the having to not take time out of your day to chase up, follow up with certain people is really, really powerful. And I'm sure everyone on the call follows up and chases people already. The whole idea of automation here would be to remove the need for you to have to manually go through your sent items on your Outlook, on your Gmail, and chase up with these people.
Right. And also, I guess if you got reminders saying this, if you have the tasks predefined from maybe when you sent the first and you say, okay, I must follow up in a week's time or whatever, then your calendar is filled maybe blocked off for a little while to do that. And then you get the reminder saying, okay, these are the ones you need to follow up on. So, okay.
Exactly. And I mean, context switching, right? Everyone knows. We all love to context switch. I love to context switch because it's a form of procrastination. You're putting off that massive task that you don't want to do. And so we all love jumping between tasks, but managing all of those tasks and what you need to do next is a massive mental burden. And again, something that automation can be used to do is, even if the task involves something very manual, you writing a personalized message, you making a phone call, you sending a connection request on LinkedIn, whatever it may be, I still think you can automate the scheduling and the reminders of that process so that you're no longer having to remember, right, what's my to-do list today? What do I have to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in this sequence for these individual candidates? And again, that's the kind of thing that obviously I'm very pro. Sourcewell obviously helps.
Yeah, okay.
Little plug there.
Any other data that you think that would be good to share as well?
So number of follow-ups I think is quite interesting. So we have, majority of our clients are UK and to a lesser extent US, probably about 70% US, UK, 30% US. And then with a smattering of people in APAC, Australia, Singapore, etc. We see a geographical difference in terms of messaging, in terms of number of follow-ups. Really, really interesting. So in America, follow-ups response rate keeps going up and up and up to like the 5th, 6th, 7th follow-up chase in this sequence. And it just seems like Americans love perseverance. I think they're used to just so many more signals, messages, culture, in terms of, how we approach people, how often we approach people, what the spacing between those messages is. Whereas in the UK, we tend to find that 2 or 3 chasers, maybe more spaced out. And then, a message saying, hey, not going to pester you anymore, but just feel free to reach out to exchange. That's pretty prime. In America, if you're not following up 4, 5, 6 times, over, maybe a relatively large space of time, you really are missing out. And so it's the cultural and geographical differences are really interesting as well, I find.
Okay. Yeah, and I always do that as well, with the follow-ups is, I guess you call it a divorce email or whatever, where you say, look, I'm not going to pester you anymore, but, and so that, that actually sometimes then.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, you cut out, so I didn't hear. Yeah.
My brain's failing me. What was I going to say? I was wondering if you ever experimented with images. It's something that really divides our client base in terms of when they're reaching out to people, especially on the candidate sourcing side. In America, we really find that using images in follow-ups gets a response rate. It might be due to culture, comfort with that kind of thing. But we have sources who Sourcewell can help with this stuff, but before they reached out to were reaching out to candidates and chasing up with them, they would send them like a meme or something in the follow-up, like a sad cat pic, like, "Hi Tim, why respond," whatever it may be. In the UK, we don't find any of our clients are doing that. And I think, especially, if you're an agency recruiter, 360 recruiter, maybe not something you'd be putting in BD, but humor, pictures, images, that's something we're seeing a lot more amongst our US client base. And we do, surprisingly, because I'm quite conservative about this stuff, see an improvement in response rate after someone sent someone, like a meme. It could be a picture of them at the company being like, "We can imagine you working here." It could be a meme, caption, whatever it may be. But sending someone, those kind of imagery, pictures, adding some more humor into the emails, a little bit more lightheartedness, we found really improves the response rate. But it's interesting because it's something that I personally, even though I use a tool like myself to recruit and to find clients, I sometimes feel slightly awkward about. And maybe it's just me being British, but I'd be super interested to hear what other people do.
And also, I wonder if you could also depend on the kind of people you're approaching. If you're going, let's say, maybe after developers, it might make them laugh and whatever. But maybe if it's, I don't know, a VP of sales, maybe, I don't know, they're maybe more conservative or, but not to say that they don't also have a sense of humor. So, maybe it's worth trying something like that.
Exactly.
And especially if it works in the US, then we should try it.
I notice Debbie has said on the chat, I GIF the hell out of my pictures. Love that. GIFs. Again, I'm guessing Debbie, I'm going to hazard a guess that Debbie's maybe located in America.
She's Apple girl from Indiana.
Perfect. What a guess. We definitely see, and it really works. I genuinely think it does. One thing that we have found a difference though is a generic GIF or a personalized GIF. So, obviously if it's just a GIF, then fine. Yeah. But sometimes putting a caption in there, like referring to their name, referring, to something about them in specific. Something that some of our actually agency recruiters also in the UK do, maybe more on the BD side. They take a picture of them or have a little GIF with them with like a whiteboard, and they put the person's name on. And actually, some people don't know this, which I think is also why it helps improve the response rate, but you can actually automate that as well. And so again, Sourcewell does this kind of stuff, but you can put kind of custom mail merge variables into pictures. So if you're adding 20 people to this campaign, each person can have that whiteboard picture, but with their name on it instead. And it sounds, again, pretty basic, maybe pretty cringe to people who are listening over in the UK, but believe me, does it work? And I think it's because not as many people are doing stuff like that. It's the same, slightly off the topic of automation, but with LinkedIn voice notes that you can start doing. I know some of our sales team have started leaving people LinkedIn voice recording notes. You can only do it from the LinkedIn app, but it really does improve response rate because I think it's the novelty. Not as many people are using it. It's harder to automate, or at least obviously automate. And so it really does help improve the response rate.
Okay. I never actually, that's another very, two good things you brought up, which is voice notes, which I have actually not used myself ever. To personalize that message maybe on a follow-up and maybe mix it up, I guess, is a good thing too, between say email or LinkedIn message and then maybe a voice note in between. That could be a very good way and to do it. And I have seen where you said like a board or something where the person's name is on there, and I figured, if you're going to do it individually, so I figured there must be some way to automate that. But it's great when you get that because it's taken a little bit more work, so it looks even more personalized than even if it is automated, but it doesn't feel automated. So that's good.
And that's the crux in this, right? Because as a recruiter, you get quite a lot of pushback sometimes. But if you really are reaching out to the right person about a relevant role, they should be flattered, that you are reaching out to them. The reason why it doesn't work is obviously certain recruiters being quite spammy, but also people feeling like you haven't invested the time in them. It goes back to that point we were talking about at the beginning. If someone calls me Timothy, I know they haven't even bothered to just even take a cursory glance over my LinkedIn profile. Yep. So do I really believe that they can add me value, or that they've putting time into this, what is effectively will turn into some kind of relationship? Have they put any time into this? No, they haven't. And, we're all proud. We've all got egos. You want to feel like someone has invested time in you as well. And any automation that can help with that is great. Any automation that takes away from that is terrible. That's actually probably a pretty good way of summarizing the entire topic.
No, it makes sense. And also what you said about, what you shouldn't then automate is, as I said, is definitely take the time to carefully look at the profile. If it's LinkedIn, for example, you're using, to make sure that it is actually relevant, and then, comment on stuff that's in the profile. And for example, in your case, it's got your name that you want to be called by. So even if the tool is great at putting in the name, but if you then change it to, for that first message, at least the reach out message, to make sure it has that, then, and the sequences will obviously follow with the same greeting. So that's always good. Let's see.
Absolutely. I think the point you were making, I think also, I think it's a tiny bit of delay.
Yeah.
COVID lockdown classic. In terms of multi-channel, I think you commented on, in terms of, I think that's vitally important as well. And what you've got to understand with the candidates and clients you're reaching out to, recruiters and salespeople spend their life sitting on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. The candidates you're reaching out to, especially if they're IT focused, are not sitting there on LinkedIn. They're on GitHub committing code, or somewhere else, on blogs, on Stack Overflow, Facebook, Twitter. They may have a LinkedIn presence. It's probably out of date, and they're definitely not on there, waiting for your connection request. And they most probably don't have notifications on their phone for LinkedIn like I do. So multi-channel approaches are key. And again, the problem with a multi-channel approach, though, is keeping track of that, and keeping track of that multi-channel approach. And going back to the whole topic of automation, what automation should be doing is helping you keep on top of a multi-channel approach and automating the steps you can. Of course, if you're going to call someone, whatever it may be, or have a meeting with them, you can't automate something like that, but you can automate keeping track of it all. And we do see that people who use Sourcewell to manage multi-channel campaigns, so that might be, as you said, it might be an initial email outreach, it might be a connection request on LinkedIn, but it might then be a follow-up over email. It might be a call if they've got their number on their profile, if they're a salesperson, whatever it may be. But that multi-channel approach really helps improve the response rate as well.
And that actually makes sense. And as you said, if you're going to automate something, then that is a task. The task is to remind you, Shafiq, do this through this channel to this person at this time, for example. And maybe you have them set up so that your first 2 hours every morning is filled with that task, so that you're, as I say, you're in the flow of just doing that. And then if that's kind of reminded you, then you can get them all done, and then you can start doing, new biz dev or whatever, else you need to do. But at least, so really it's kind of the automating the tasks, as you said, which is a good idea, but not the personalization, because, well, you can't really, well, not successfully anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's some really, really good stuff. Let me see, anything from the channel. No other comments really, but as you said, Debbie did say that she really uses GIFs a lot. So definitely something I'm going to learn to try as well, and see if I have any more success on this side of the pond.
And I think the key with all this stuff is testing, right? For ages I would try different outreaches. I'd have an idea, or what I thought was an idea, but humans are terrible at confirmation bias, being like, this is what works, this definitely doesn't work. And again, something that automation can help in the outbound process is logging and tracking all this stuff as well, so that you can actually be a little bit more scientific about this stuff and say, right, I've got these 2 different campaigns. I'm reaching out to the same person. I'm reaching out to the same type of people, but I'm going to try a different subject line. I'm going to try a different, I'm going to try GIF. I'm not going to try GIF. And then have a statistically significant number of people that you try that across. Because if you're doing that completely manually, that logging of data yourself, you'll probably do it across 20 people, which is not nearly enough to get any kind of proper result from. And so automation there is collecting all of the relatively mundane statistics, like who's opening your emails, who's clicking on them, who responded to what message in your sequence, what's landing well. Does that subject line better than the other? Collecting all of that stuff is vitally important. I think another thing that automation can help with as well.
Yeah, I have a question soon from the panel. I'll ask you in a second. Definitely one of the things is, I remember on a previous working lunch we had, and somebody said that, if you don't keep track of the data, or if you don't measure the data, then you can't improve, because you don't know if it's working or not, because you have no data to actually track it. So that definitely makes sense, that you really need to track all the data so that you can see what works and what doesn't. And it may even change over time, but at least you can, as long as you're continuously keeping track of the data and looking at it, you know what's working. And you may even find that as you get more data for maybe different kinds of roles, different things work. So for engineers, this works. For salespeople, that works. And
you'd be surprised what you find out. Often it's different to what your initial intuition is.
Exactly. Yeah. So Srinivasa is asking, hi Tim, does Sourcewell have a Chrome extension or is it a cloud application? And would like to know how safe it is. I assume he means probably that LinkedIn doesn't block you or something. And let's start with that.
Yeah, really good question. So from a Sourcewell side, Sourcewell, just to be clear, does not automate anything on LinkedIn. We don't actually interact with LinkedIn at all. We have a Chrome extension. It's a cloud-based web app. But often, if people are looking at LinkedIn automation tools, you're quite right in the fact that there are cloud-based LinkedIn automation tools that are Chrome extension LinkedIn automation tools. The difference there isn't the fact that someone's got a Chrome extension; it's the method by which they automate LinkedIn. So cloud-based LinkedIn automators, they get an IP address near you, and they basically kind of control it, not on your computer. They do it in the background. Your computer could be turned off. They have a similar IP address. They mimic your behavior and do stuff like that. Traditional Chrome extensions, which automate LinkedIn, kind of take over your screen. They have quite robotic behavior. You have to sometimes move your screen to one side. They tend to be a hell of a lot cheaper than the cloud ones, but LinkedIn can pick up on that stuff, and they do so, and they restrict your account. So confusingly here, Sourcewell is actually neither of those things. So we automate emailing. So we're plugged into your Outlook, we're plugged into your Gmail to help you send emails. They'll be in your sent items on your Gmail. It's not like some kind of MailChimp replacement. We have a Chrome extension which lurks alongside sites like LinkedIn, GitHub, Facebook, Stack Overflow, but we don't automate LinkedIn itself. I mean, partly for the reason, one, we don't want to get shut down or sued by LinkedIn. You'll notice that all LinkedIn automation tools, if you ever check them out, you'll have no idea where they're based. They have no address, nothing like that, because LinkedIn will sue the hell out of them. But also just because often what you can do with LinkedIn automation tool is automate that initial step, which I personally don't think works anyway in terms of, and also then puts your account at risk. So in answer to the gentleman's question, is it Srinivasa? So we're not a LinkedIn automation tool. We have a cloud application. We have a Chrome extension, but that Chrome extension just helps you without having to leave the page, source people from GitHub, Facebook, Stack Overflow, LinkedIn, wherever. Pull together their contact details. And actually, I do notice he says, what geography does Sourcewell work best for contact finding? That's also a really good question. So again, Sourcewell isn't a contact finder like Lucia or Rocket Reach or Hunter, like you guys or Srini. Isn't kind of one of those. But what we do is we plug into about 5 or 6 of the best data providers that we can find. So a lot of our clients, sometimes they might bring their own as well. Some of our clients have subscriptions to things like ZoomInfo, Lucia, Rocket Reach. That's fine. If they have an API key, they can plug it in. Our Chrome extension will surface the results from all of the different tools they find, because one pain point we find amongst our recruiters is that they're running 10 different Chrome extensions in different geographies, different regions, and one of them's good, then it gets really bad, etc. So our tool basically is constantly just looking for and plugging into the best data providers that are out there, but clients can bring their own. Really interesting in terms of if people just want an unbiased view on what works and what doesn't. ZoomInfo is obviously incredible in the US. Lucia is very good in Europe, I find. Well, not very good. I mean, all data finders are worse in Europe than in America. There's just so much more data on people in America. And again, that's due to GDPR and what they can do and what they can't do. But yeah, Lucia's pretty good in Europe. Signal Hire is quite good. I don't know if people have heard of that. Rocket Reach, again, I find is only good in America. Yeah, I mean, that's my view. I can talk in a sad amount of detail. We also plug into data providers that don't have a front end. So a lot of tools, I'm sure people have heard of things like Seek Out, Hire Tool, Gem. Gem's a competitor to us as well. I can go into a sad amount of detail about why I think we're better, but they all plug into these data providers like you guys plug into, but they also plug into these other ones that don't have front ends. They don't have Chrome extensions you guys can run. And so we plug into tools like that as well. But I think as Trini has been saying, that the problem is you have to use about 5 or 6 different tools. The advantage of a tool like Sourcewell or another tool that's out there, that's kind of the outreach messaging part, that's useful, is that we will plug into about 5 or 6 of those tools, and just if there are contact details for that person legitimately available on the web, we will find them. The problem with having to use all those tools yourself is you find the recruiters in your team are then running Contact Out, they're running Lucia, they're running Rocket Reach. You've got multiple distance descriptions, and also just the time it takes.
Okay, no, that's really good. Well, Srini asked about pricing, but I'll send him a message later on, and he can get hold of you directly later on.
Sure.
Yeah, and I agree with Erica. Yeah, I'm not a fan of LinkedIn automation tools, and also, you know, in a few weeks, one of the guests I'm going to have on is Mr. LinkedIn, and really, you know, LinkedIn is really about a communication platform and networking platform, not, you know, and it's not designed for automation for sure, and that's why LinkedIn is very much against that, and I agree with, you know, Mark and with Eric as well. I will definitely not do that. And yeah, exactly. As Erica says, you know, you can tell when it is automated, and as we've talked about earlier about, you know, how fake it can come across. You know, we're getting near the end. So what I thought we'd do is maybe, you know, after each show, it might be good to have some takeaways that people can, you know, things that they should do or not do, but definitely what maybe they should do after this call. So I've written down some, so I don't want to steal your thunder. So if you want to say it first.
Sure. I mean, I think the answer is definitely automate, but automate within reason. I mean, if you guys, either yourselves or you have teams of really good people, as I was saying before, no one wants to do the manual repetitive tasks that you can automate. And so if you know, kind of agree that time is money and you're investing time into the people in your team, you want your investment in your team to pay off, you should be automating tasks, task management, follow-up chasing, you know, aggregation, pushing data into your applicant tracking system or your CRM. Those are all tasks you should absolutely automate. But do not go too far, which everyone does when they get too excited, and automate the other parts of the process, which involve picking the right people and tailoring the messaging to that person. They are absolute no-nos, at least in my book.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So one of the things you talked about, and I'll add to your kind of maybe takeaways, is, as you said, you know, make sure you personalize that first email, because the response rate, when it is personalized, you said it's somewhere between 25 and 40% increase in the open rate. So that's a really good takeaway.
Reply rate, I think, or maybe I said open
rate. Sorry, reply rate.
Reply rate,
yeah. I wrote down response rate, so to me, reply response, yeah. And then, as I said, follow up, and in the US, follow up even more. So, but the fact that, you know, that even in general, that you're getting, you know, an increased reply rate of 65 to 70% for your second message, then it's, you know, that's a no-brainer. It's, you know, that's definitely worth it. So anything else you think we should let everyone know about?
No, I think just to caveat that, obviously that the follow-up needs to not seem automated too, you know. Correct. So and one thing I actually see is really interesting. Once people have a tool which can follow up automatically for them, they tend to put a lot of information into a follow-up, because they're like, well, I don't have to type this out each time. So I can tell them even more why this job offer is particularly good. But that's not natural. If you chase up with someone or follow up with someone as a human, you will probably do 2 or 3 sentences. You may add a bit of humor in. You may apologize for reaching out, whatever it may be. And so it's important to know that even if you do automate the process of having to go through your sent items and chase up with people who haven't responded, you keep that as natural as possible.
Okay, that's very good. And then actually another thing was you mentioned, which I will definitely try myself, which is just put the company name on the subject, because I mean that could be really gold mine. And then as Debbie and Srini said, you know, emojis or GIFs, and maybe even with their name on it. So those are a few things that people can definitely take away from this chat today. What I thought I'd also do is let us see what else is coming up in the coming weeks. So next week we've got GPS. He's going to have another fantastic show, I'm sure. He's got Tracy Barrett on to talk about practical pandemic PR. And then the week after, Louise has John Brooks and Louise Ogilvy, and that's about recruitment fees and when you should drop yours. Hopefully never, but I guess that's a recruiter's dream. So that's the next topics that are coming up. Any closing remarks, Tim?
I don't think so. I think just thanks so much for having me. If anyone wants to have a chat with me about all things sourcing tech, not just Sourcewell and further automation, feel free to reach out to me on
what I'll
LinkedIn.
do later on is I'll put a link in on the site, or if while I'm maybe closing up, if you want to just put in your LinkedIn profile, contact details or whatever, then they can get hold of you directly. So thank you everyone for being on the show today. I hope you enjoyed it and you had some good takeaways from today. And look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week and enjoy the rest of your lunch. See you.
Bye.